Have you ever seen taxes hiked for a war? Ever? No? So why is it that we feel compelled to raise taxes for healthcare? Why is it we feel compelled to raise taxes for a Green New Deal? Why is it we feel compelled to raise taxes for these things? Why do we feel like we've got to pay for it? It's deeply troubling because it's going to put things like Medicare for all, which, okay, so these people don't want to give up their private health insurance. Ridiculous. They don't want to give that up. Why? I don't effing know. I don't know. I can't answer why stupidity does stupid things, but they don't want to. But because Bernie's talking about paying for it with taxes, what's the number one boogaboo with the friggin' Republicans? Well, you're going to raise taxes, man. Feeding that dog. Feeding it. And it's not true, because no matter whether he says taxes are paying for it, they aren't. They physically cannot do it. That's not how it works. The dollars have to be spent first before you can collect them back in taxes where they are deleted. The dollar is merely a tax credit. So maybe it's used to stave off inflation. Maybe it's used to solve wealth inequality. Okay. But it doesn't pay for any of these programs. And by tying the tax increases to these programs, it's giving life to our enemy to fight back against these things that are so life-affirming. Bernie has got the right programs. He's got the right everything. He's even got the best economic advisor he could ever have. But these people atop him are cowards that are telling him not to say this stuff. You can quibble with me over strategy, but trust me when I say this, when he stands on the debate stage and even Elizabeth Drug Warren can sit there and punch him around about paying for programs, and all the other dummies up there on the Democratic debate stage can hit him for how to pay for programs. And all the other Democrats are going, how's he going to pay for programs? They're easy. They're the lightweights compared to what's coming up next. So this storyline is going to keep perpetuating. And you know the Republicans are very, very good at the dumb line, but that everybody follows. Oh, he's just going to raise your taxes. He's just going to raise your taxes. And for middle America and for people that are working poor, they're going to hear that and they're going to say, oh, hell no. And you're going to have to do all these mental gymnastics talking about how it's kind of like a tax cut and it's this and it's that and it's the other. It's an unforced error. And it sucks because he's going to have to stand there with the bright lights of the camera on him and try and do a dance to try and explain what he knows you need to hear because you can't fathom the fact that the federal government creates pieces of paper. We can create bombs, we can create, but you just can't figure out how to create pieces of paper. I don't get it. How do we create pieces of paper? Monopoly did it. How come the U.S. can't figure out how to do it? God, it's the one thing you can't think the federal government can create out of thin air is keystrokes and dollars. For God's sakes, look who signs the piece of paper. The dollar bill is signed by the damn Treasury. The Treasury Secretary's name is on it. Come on. So let me add to the fire here. This right here is a great article. I'm going to read this to you. It's short. It's by a guy who's not exactly an MMTer. He's adjacent. And he gets some things wrong here and there, but he gets this one dead spot on. His name is Roger Malcolm Mitchell, and he's from Mythfighter. I'm going to read this to you real quickly. So what Roger Malcolm Mitchell says is 2 questions that solve the Medicare for all dilemma. It takes 2 things to keep people in chains: the ignorance of the oppressed and the treachery of their leaders. Before you read another article about Medicare for all and who will pay for it, question, please take some time to think about the answer. Just 2 questions. 1, do you believe every American should have medical care, or should some Americans be forced to do without medical care? It's a question you're going to have to ask people. Has nothing to do with money, has to do with, do you even think they deserve it? And the second one is, if you believe every American, rich or poor, should have medical care, who will pay for it? Fair question, right? Peter Suderman, the features editor at Reason.com, writes regularly on healthcare. The federal budget, tech policy, and pop culture, he believes the government should not pay for health care. I don't know why he never says he's a libertarian, so he doesn't like big government. Why again? He never says. How big is too big? Yet again, he never says. But if the government doesn't pay, all who's left is you. You pay if your company pays because your company figures the cost of healthcare insurance as part of your salary. You pay if your insurance company pays, it's in your premiums. You pay if the hospital emergency room pays because that forces the hospital to raise prices for all other services. You pay if no one pays and some Americans lack health care. Their ill health means that they can't be productive contributors to the U.S. economy. You pay if your city, county, or state pays for health care because these governments rely on your taxes to fund their spending. That's the state and local governments. That's why these people that run around and say, we're going to do it in California, we're going to do it in Delaware, we're going to do it in friggin' Minnesota, are freaking not getting it. It's not getting it. So in short, there's no magic. You always have to pay directly or indirectly, except there is magic. It's the magic of monetary sovereignty, in other words, MMT, but he's got some things. So the U.S. federal government is monetarily sovereign. About 240 years ago, the new U.S. government created the U.S. dollar. Millions of them from thin freaking air, okay? Simply by creating laws from thin air. Since then, it has continued to create laws and dollars, all from thin air. The very first dollars were not funded by taxes. They were created by laws. Do you get this? The dollars weren't, hey, guys, anybody find any of them dollars, man? They haven't been created yet, but anybody find any of them dollars? No. Fucking government, man, wrote a law, said, here's dollars. This is what we're using to spend on. You pay taxes in this. This is how you do commerce. Here you go. Dollar. Okay? So you as a voter have, and ever since then, the tax dollars you send to Washington, D.C., willingly or grudgingly, still pay for nothing. Even if you didn't send a single tax dollar or even a tax penny to Washington, the U.S. federal government still could continue spending endlessly. Do you get this? Endlessly. So, you as a voter have two choices. You can continue to pay for your health care either via direct payment from your checking account or via indirect payment through your company's insurance plan or via indirect payment via higher hospital charges, or you can pay by being sick without care. Or the federal government can pay, and it would cost you nothing. That's it. Just two choices. There are no other options. All those people who complain about the cost of medical care, Medicare for all, are really telling you that you should pay directly or indirectly. Keep in mind as you read the following excerpts. How to pay for Medicare for all. Multiple estimates have found that the single-payer plan, which would eliminate virtually all private health insurance, would require more than $30 trillion in additional government spending over a decade. A historically unprecedented sum. 30 trillion sure sounds like a lot, huh? Additional federal government spending costs you nothing. Nothing. The federal government already has spent more than $20 trillion and it has cost you nothing. How do I know? Because the federal debt is more than $20 trillion and the federal debt represents federal spending you clearly have not paid for. In other words, the dollars in circulation today that have not been taxed is what the sum total of the national debt is to the penny. To the penny. It's just untaxed money. Every dollar is debt because it's just the way it falls on the freaking balance sheet. And if additional $30 trillion is really needed for healthcare, that means Americans currently are doing without $30 trillion worth of healthcare. Think about it. $30 trillion worth of needs, demand. is not being met, if that's the case. That's way too much sickness not being treated in this. The world's wealthiest nation. And wealthiest is not about cash. Wealthiest is about natural resources, productive capacity, and the ability to technologically advance our way through just about any problem we can find. Bernie Sanders cited a study that just came out of Yale University, published in Lancet magazine, one of the prestigious medical journals in the world. The study purports to show that Sanders' Medicare for All plan would save $450 billion a year and 68,000 lives. A detailed article produced by Kaiser Health News and PolitiFact, however, disagrees. The Lancet study assumes, for example, that Sanders' plan could pay Medicare rates across the board. Medicare rates are far lower than private insurance rates, and the hospital lobby is a powerful political force that has successfully fought off payment reductions in multiple venues. Suderman ignores one simple fact. The hospital lobby has existed a long time, and Medicare exists, and its rates are far lower than private health insurance rates. How did that happen? Could it be that past left-wing Congresses were more caring and moral than today's right-wing Senate? Right-wing Senate? Not that it really matters, for as we have said on numerous occasions, the federal government, being monetarily sovereign, can afford anything. In fact, the more the federal government deficit spends, the more economic growth dollars enter the private sector. Do you understand? Two sides of the ledger. Public debt is private savings. Do you get this? Please tell me you get this. It ain't hard. It's Boolean zeros and ones. Yes, no. Come on, get it. That is how an economy grows. The Lancet study Sanders cites also lowballs the likely increase in utilization that would come from eliminating copayments and other cost-sharing mechanisms, as Sanders' Medicare for All plan calls for. Although it allows that the newly insured would use more care, it assures that the currently insured would not seek to use more health services. As Harvard health policy researcher Adriana McIntyre points out, that's deeply unrealistic. Yes, utilization would increase, and that is a very good thing. Indeed. It is quite doubtful that people would make unnecessary visits to the doctor or hospital just because they're free. So the additional utilization would benefit healthfulness. That is the whole idea, to improve America's health. There are other problems as well, most notably that the study simply doesn't account for about $4 trillion in expected long-term care spending that would be part of the bill under Sanders' Medicare for All plan. Who gives a fuck? Okay? It's just pieces of paper, for fuck's sake. It's so unbelievable that we can't get this right. Is this supposed to be a bug or a feature? The lack of long-term care, particularly for the elderly, is a real disgrace in America. Visualize yourself without long-term care insurance and having to choose between care at a facility and no care, dying alone at home. You imbeciles. This is evil. The heartlessness of Sunderman's position is truly stunning. The study hand waves away research suggesting that its headline lives saved figure is substantially overstated. Is 68,000 lives saved too high an estimate? Suderman never says what the correct number is. How about 50,000 saved lives, 40,000 saved lives? How many saved lives are too few for Suderman to be concerned about? The question of how to pay for Medicare for all has come up quite frequently in the debates, and the repetition may even be having a substantial impact on the race. Senator Kamala Harris struggled with the payment question. Her stumbles probably contributed to her declining position in the race, and she eventually left the field. Senator Elizabeth Warren released a complex financing scheme. Of course she did. She's a fucking neoliberal. This generated substantial criticism and helped demonstrate how she relies on a veneer of wonkishness to avoid tough questions. Eventually, Warren released a second plan that called for a delayed implementation of full-fledged Medicare for all, which many understandably read as a sign that she wasn't serious about the idea. And damn it, Pocahontas wasn't serious. In both cases, we learned something essential about the candidates and how they respond to pressure. Harris didn't have a firm initial grasp of the policy mechanics, and she flailed and flip-flopped in search of a politically palatable answer. Warren bandwagoned with the most progressive candidate, eventually releasing a dubious but detailed plan that suggested she wasn't serious, then followed it with another one that undercut the first, all the while pretending it didn't. The same is now true of Sanders, and his response, it appears, is to point to an obviously unsound study conducted by a sympathetic voice and then lie about the rest of the existing research. Bullshit. The Medicare for all financing question is not just a policy question, it's a test of character, and Sanders failed it. No, Mr. Libertarian Peter Suderman, the Medicare for all is not just a test of character. It is also a test of economic knowledge, and you failed both tests. You failed both tests, Suderman. You failed the test of character by giving the back of your hand to all the sick people who are or will lead lives of misery or die early because they can't afford proper care. You throw compassion to the wind and prefer to talk about money. And then you failed the test of economic knowledge because you don't understand the difference between federal financing and state and local government business and personal financing. You also don't understand the effect that illness has on America's economic growth. Perhaps the coronavirus will teach you. And while the Democrats may favor Medicare for all for compassionate and economic reasons, they too display a stunning ignorance of federal financing. And that ignorance will kill a program the people of this nation so fucking greatly need.